The unfunded liability, don't worry about this, I'm going to break it down for you, but for those of you at home or those of you in the audience that later want to go on our website and look up the presentation and want to check all the numbers are all here. But what I'm trying to present here is that the unfunded liability, it got out into the public very early on based on the PERS reports that were received December 1. And it was stated that our unfunded liability was $290 million. And it included both PERS and retiree medical. So we met with those folks and we discussed it. And we've been able to agree on how it should be adjusted. And the way we do that is, first of all, the $290 million, which is a good number, it comes from PERS, did not include a reduction for the present value of future contributions, both employer and employee. And when you take that into consideration, which is right out of the PERS report, you reduce the $290 million by $67 million. The $290 million also included the Livermore portion of the LPFD. That's their liability. It needs to be deducted from Pleasanton, and that is $40 million. And when you do that, you get to an adjusted unfunded actuarial accrued liability of $183 million. It's still a very large number, and we know that. That number is based on market value of assets. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. But I want you also to know that the city annually discloses its unfunded actuarial accrued liability in its comprehensive annual financial report, which is our CAFR, which our auditors audit every year. And actually, our 2004 through 2010 CAFRs are posted on the city's website. But what we do is we follow Governmental Accounting Standards Board promulgations 27, 43, and 45, and Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. And what those tell us to do is to base that unfunded actuarial accrued liability on actuarial value of assets. And so when you do that, it's $121 million. And it breaks down, $90 million is PERS, and $30 million is retiree medical. And so if you look at the 153, 153 is PERS, and $30 million is retiree medical. So we admit that our actuarial accrued unfunded liability is somewhere between $121 million and $183 million. The difference between the two is the actuarial valuation is based on cost of securities and holding those investments to maturity. So it is more of a valuation determined over time. The market valuation is the value of the assets, assuming that they were converted to cash on the valuation date, which was June 30th, 2009. So those are the differences, and I'll show you some examples of how those two have tracked each other. But just to kind of put it in perspective, if we were fully funded, the valuation of the assets, depending on which one you pick, market value or actuarial value, would equal the accrued actuarial liability. That's a great place to be, and I'm going to show you that we've actually been above 100% for a number of years. Not currently, but over the last 10-year period. And I professionally don't lose a whole lot of sleep at night, given that it's not 100%, but I do start to worry when it's less than 80%. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more to you. So the valuation of the assets, depending on which one you pick, divided by the accrued actuarial liability is our funding ratio. And we like to see that greater than or equal to 80%. And we've also been at 80% for a very long time, but not right now. So a benchmark might be, and we're going to get it, I'm going to talk to you about some of our fiscal policies, but a benchmark might be for us that we strive for 80% funding ratio. So what is the funding ratio currently? What this shows is what our assets have been just for miscellaneous. I'm going to have 4 slides. We have 3 groups. I'd have to show you 12 slides to show you all. And since the miscellaneous group is really what we're here to concentrate on, I'm going to show you the valuation of their assets. You'll see that these are in millions. It started out about 20 million. What's interesting about the two bars is that the green and the red and the green is that the valuations starting in 1994 were identical. Okay, 23 and 23 million were our actuarial, which is the red, and the green is market value. They pretty much hover together. They're growing. That's the good news. With reinvestment and new contributions, basically like your 401k, our assets are growing. And they hover together, pretty much together. 07, look at that. Market value, as one would expect, is higher than actuarial value. Okay? And they hover in 08 about identical. And then in 09, which we got this information December 1st, 2010, as of June 30th, 09, there's a big discrepancy. Market value is lower than actuarial value considerably as a result of the economy. The funding ratio that I mentioned earlier, that I lose sleep when it drops below 80%, and I'd like to see us strive to maintain 80%, that's what this graph is depicting. So interestingly enough, there's 100%. This starts in 1994 and goes to 2009, because that's the information we have from PERS, June 30th, 2009. And during that period of time, up until 2001, we were, hold on, my original. Julie, can you just bring my original? It's okay. Oh, thank you. I apologize. Okay. I can't see the board. Well, I'll need to connect. Oh, good. Okay. He's being very generous and turning the pages for me, too. Okay, so getting back to our funding ratio. Here it is at 100% from 1994 to 2009, and from 1994 to 2001, and remember the red is the actuarial value and the green is market, we were at 100% or above. Okay? So here's the 80% where I start to lose sleep. And fortunately, we've been hovering around it for the whole entire time except 09. So we know we have a problem. And it started June 30th, 09, and we found out about it December 1st, 2010. Okay? So how do we reduce the unfunded liability? Well, we reduce the cost of the benefits is one way, and we have existing employees pay their contribution, as we've mentioned. We have 0% salary increases. That helps for a whole array of things, short-term, long-term. Interestingly enough, when PERS throws all the elements into the computer, one thing they put in there when they're predicting the present value of the future benefits is that they assume an annual salary increase of 3.25%. So anytime we can be below that, we'll have a positive impact on the unfunded liability. Also, implementing a two-tier system for new employees. We're not hiring a whole lot of new employees right now, but believe it or not, in 15 years when we've pretty much cleansed the system, we start to see a pretty significant impact as a result of the two-tiered system. So it's really important to get it in place the sooner the better. And then the final thing that we can do as far as reducing our cost of benefits is to make supplemental payments to PERS to accelerate the payoff of the unfunded liability. The unfunded liability sits out there as an interest-only mortgage. And one way we can obviously accelerate the payoff of the unfunded liability is to make principal payments. And we do that by making supplemental payments. So we don't just sit back and rely on PERS to give us the rates and think that PERS is going to take care of us. We have to become fiscally responsible here at Pleasanton, and one way to do that is to make supplemental payments. And I'll talk more about
Emily,
that. Yes.
Are you going to touch on the fact that we've made supplemental payments previously in another area?
Yes, I will. So another way to reduce the unfunded liability is to achieve a higher rate of return on investments. Now, clearly, this is PERS's job. It's not Pleasanton's. Good news is for the 2010 calendar year, PERS earned 13.3%. But the bad news is that they always assume 7.75. So in 2008, when they lost 24%, which is what's causing us all the problems that we're currently experiencing, they assumed they would earn 7.75, and they lost 24. So the impact to the portfolio was like a 31% loss. So here, achieve a higher rate of return, but it's a pretty high standard when they're already assuming 7.75. Also, everyone should know that PERS is considering reducing their assumed rate of return. It's not a big reduction. Outside the state of California, pretty much every agency has their own pension plan. They don't have public employees' retirement systems like California does, handled by the state. We have it for our city employees, and then teachers is the STRS program. Outside of California, it's handled by every little jurisdiction, and so they get extremely conservative because this has a big impact on their costs of pensions. They typically use 6.5% as the rate of return. So PERS is contemplating reducing the 7 3/4 to 7.5. The bad news is that'll cause the employer rates to go up probably somewhere between 2 and 4%, and that's not even in our numbers at this point. Also, by decreasing the rate, it will cause the unfunded liability to go up. Finally, mortality rates, if they were to go down, would be a good thing. The bad news is they're not going in that direction. Public employees are living longer. Police and fire had really bad mortality rates. They have all gotten healthy, which is a good thing. And as a result of it, the mortality rates have increased. This was very recently, and it's caused everything to increase accordingly. They're living longer. We have to pay their retirement longer.